Hello, I'm Julie Reuben. I'm the Charles Warren Professor of the History of American Education here at the Harvard Graduate School for Education. Welcome to Education Now. The early leaders of our nation believed that educating citizens was essential for securing our emerging democracy. In fact, preparing people for democratic engagement was one of the main reasons for introducing free public education. But these days, support for our constitutional democracy is waning, particularly among Americans under the age of 40. There's no easy answers to our current challenges. However, today we're going to look at the important role that education can play. We'd like to hear your questions for our panel, so you can submit those by using the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you'll also find closed caption access there. So let's get started by welcoming our guests. Danielle Allen is the faculty director of the Civic Learning Institute here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She's also the James Bryant Conant University professor at Harvard Education. And we also have Tom Trainor. He's an 8th grade civics teacher in the Cambridge Public Schools in Massachusetts. It's great to have you both here.
Thanks, Julie. Glad to be here.
And thank you for having me.
Danielle, let's start with you. How would you describe the current state of civic education in America today?
Thanks so much, Julie. I always have to start by just expressing a sort of personal gratitude for my own family. My family was super civically engaged, and so I had the chance to learn a lot about our democracy and how it works from family members. My granddad helped found one of the first NAACP chapters in Northern Florida. My great-grandparents fought for women's right to vote. My great-granddad marched with suffragettes on Boston Common, and my great-grandmother ended up as president of the League of Women Voters in Michigan in the 1930s. I'm narrating that family history because it was really only when I became an educator myself that I came to understand how, relatively speaking, rare it was to get as rich of an education in civic life as I had happened to get from my family. I realized I was often encountering students who really weren't getting the same kinds of rich learning opportunities. That, of course, then led me to wonder why. And soon one learns that this country has worked so hard to invest in STEM education for nigh on 70 years that we have failed to invest in civic education. That resulted in a situation about 5 years ago where, as a nation, we were putting $50 per kid per year into STEM education and only 5 cents per kid per year into civic education. There are other causes too, but basically we've had a disinvestment, despite the fact that there's a huge appetite among kids for real opportunities to understand the world around them and their part in that world. So I hope that gives you a picture, Julie, of the current state of things.
Well, thank you, Danielle. Besides underinvestment, I understand there's also been decades of fighting over what to teach in civic education classes. What do you see as the best path forward?
Exactly. Thanks so much for raising that. So I mentioned the importance of STEM education and the way in which that's sort of left civic learning in the shadows. We do need STEM for sure. It's not an either or, but we really need both. Also, the other reason civic education got squeezed out was because of polarization among adults. Fights over how to narrate American history, for example. Is it a story of glory and triumph or of gory oppression, genocide and domination and things like that? And that fight has meant that for almost 3 decades, grown-ups couldn't agree on what should be taught in civic education courses. I'm really thrilled to say that that situation no longer applies. About 4 years ago, 2021, a roadmap, Educating for American Democracy, a roadmap to Educating for American Democracy was released, which answers the question of what we can and should teach in civic learning. It's an inquiry framework, a lot of questions, but it focuses on core content. And what's really important about this effort is that came from a group of about 300 educators and scholars and practitioners from around the country who were diverse in every single dimension, background, geography, professional expertise, and also viewpoint. So for once, we looked at each other and we said, we know we disagree on so much, but we're going to link arms and work together to come up with a shared vision of what kids should learn. So the Educating for American Democracy roadmap unites education and core knowledge with thinking about how to scaffold development of skills for civic agency and responsibility. It unites thinking about the philosophical foundations and constitutional institutions with understanding social movements and how things have changed in the country over time. It asks students to understand history, but also to think about the American people in the present and the opportunities and challenges that we have to face together now. So I would point people to the Educating for American Democracy roadmap as a great resource answering the question of what and how we can teach in civic education courses today.
Wow, that does sound like such an amazing resource. Tom, how do you help learners to practice democratic engagement in your eighth grade civics classroom?
Yeah, thank you for asking. First, it's just an honor to be here, especially speaking with somebody like Danielle, who is a hero of mine and a leader in civic education. So just thank you, Danielle, for all you do for educators like me. And it's really about kind of having students realize that they're not just passengers. They are the drivers of civic change that they want to see. So it's really helping young people find their civic voice and capacity to create the change that they really want to see happen. Because we're always talking about we want to create this more perfect union. And that's really what we want. You know, we're trying to always get better and strive to be better. And students and young people are at the core of that. So really it's about identifying what matters to them, trying to get as many perspectives as they can, creating action plans, engaging with community members, people with high civic capital, you know, and even if they don't get the desired results that they see like in eighth grade, we're building those transfer skills and civic dispositions that hopefully are vital to the preservation of, you know, our constitutional democracy and, you know, create that world we all want to live in and be in.
Wow, that sounds really great. I understand that you were one of the co-designers with Harvard researchers of an eighth grade curriculum unit named Civic Engagement in Our Democracy. What's unique about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, the DKP, I just think I've been teaching in public education for 20 years, just as a professional development organization, they're first place. There's not even a close second. The way they are so responsive to educators, they take in ideas and the follow through. And it really all stems from what I was just talking about. Students are the drivers of the curriculum. It's all project-based learning that is student-centered. We ground the curriculum in student values. We have these shared civic values that are really the foundation for it. And from there, students are engaging with civic stories that help them understand the different ways that we can interact with these institutions, once again, to really create the positive change that we want to see.
And I believe there's a student-led civics project as part of that. Can you tell us about that project and why it's so important?
Absolutely. And it's really the reason that I teach it. It's just that it's nothing more inspiring than seeing young people realize their power as change makers. So essentially, it's taking all the amazing stuff that we've done throughout the year and students find an issue that they care about that's really of passion to them, that connects to their values that they identified. And then they start to think about how do they make it about more than just themselves. From there, they go into an intense research on that issue where they try to find as many different perspectives as they can. After they found that research that really grounds their project, they make an action plan, a theory for change. And then after they do that, they create the action plan, they go and actually do it. They're contacting their school committee members, they're contacting their city councilors, they're engaging with their community. And then at the end, hopefully they see some change. But if not, as I said earlier, they realize their potential and what they can do and how they can be part of the, you know, the community that they want to be in and the democracy they want to live in.
Danielle, we just heard about this incredible curriculum that Tom is doing in his class. I'm wondering how important it is to provide resources for educators, including professional development for this work.
I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be in this conversation with Tom because we've been working together for many years at this point, and he is one of the best teachers I've had the pleasure of encountering. And that's just important to say because I'll talk about the resources educators need, but the truth is the curriculum that we developed here on the Harvard team with educators, with Tom and others, could not be as good as it is if it weren't for the combined expertise of educators and researchers. Both groups bring expertise to the table, and we put that together in our development of the curriculum. So it's just, we're really proud of it. And in terms of what educators need, well, I think we all have awareness that social studies in our school systems hasn't gotten the same sort of airtime, same resources as STEM and English language arts. It's often not, in the official public accountability structures, and as a result of that, doesn't have tests, therefore doesn't have the same time allocations, the same resource investments and the like. But professionals need professional development in the space of social studies just as much as they do in ELA or STEM. So we've built the Civic Learning Institute here at Harvard to offer online courses to educators to support them in developing their sense of confidence and innovation in civic education. Some of those courses are in core content areas, everything from the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution to the Vietnam War and the US position in that, to also courses that are about pedagogy. How can you use something like the Educating for American Democracy roadmap? How do you bring together education on core disciplinary knowledge with that scaffolding of skills for civic agency that Tom was describing? So this is where not only do educators have the chance to build content knowledge, build expertise and practice, but also form a community of peer professionals. And at the end of the day, I think that's one of the most important things, one of the most important resources educators need is to see that they are part of a big community of practice, all facing the same kinds of design puzzles. So for example, the Educating for American Democracy roadmap puts forward the idea that one of the design puzzles is how to support reflective patriotism in a curriculum. You do want to support a sense of strong positive connection to our institutions, to the country, and also clear-eyed ability to see the whole picture, good and bad together. So how do you design to support reflective patriotism? There's no easy answer. And our teachers, though, our educators, they are the experts. They are finding solutions to puzzles like that in the classroom every day. So what our institute also does is really bring teachers together for those peer conversations. So we can name that we've got 5 different design principles and design puzzles that we focus on, and then really surface educator expertise to help build out our shared knowledge for how to achieve excellence in civic learning.
Oh, that sounds like a really wonderful resource. Experts in this field maintain that all work with young people presents a wide array of opportunities for them to practice civic skills. So I'm wondering, from both of your perspective, what are the opportunities at the school-wide level to lead this work across grade levels and subject areas, and also to continue the learning outside of schools?
Well, maybe I'll start for a moment and then pass it to Tom. I really want to hear your perspective, Tom. But I'll say, for starters, for those of us who worked on the Educating for American Democracy roadmap, we are really encouraging schools to develop school-wide civic learning or civic readiness plans. So it's, yes, here in the curriculum Tom and I worked on, it's grade 8, but you can do the work at all grade levels. And ideally, what you're doing is helping people develop a civic identity. And that is, as Tom said, it's about how they put their values together with their understanding of institutions, their ability to do research, and their ability to be in a strong sort of spirit of reciprocity with others, including others who disagree with them. And so that work on developing that civic identity in that way, again, it's across grade level. And so ideally, it's also across disciplines. ELA educators can participate, science educators can participate. So school leaders, I think, have a really rich opportunity to start sort of producing a map in the school level for how that growth occurs from one grade to the next. We are very happy to talk to people if people are interested in exploring that kind of work at the school level. Would be delighted to have people reach out to me and connect people to my team.
Yeah, and I'll just pick up from there. I think just going back to that student-led civics project, I mean, as an 8th grade educator, that is the highlight of pretty much everyone's year. And that student-led civics project, especially in my district of Cambridge, we've expanded it so much that we have these different showcases throughout the year, which students are able to interact with change makers from the community, other students from other schools that they don't normally interact with. And just like this, just level of excitement around civics and civic engagement and issues that they care about, I think is what we're all striving for. And so I think in Cambridge, we're doing a fantastic job with that.
Wonderful. Well, now we can turn to some of the questions that the audience has asked. Tom, what types of issues are students tackling in their student-led civics projects?
Yeah, so it's a wide range, as you can imagine, because it's really student-centered. So we really try to get at what student values are. And they can be very different. So they can be things that are school-based, like healthy lunch stuff. They can be about starting of school times, or they can expand. We had a group last year that really focused on the juvenile justice system. They had friends and family members who were engaged in the justice system at a really young age. So it really spoke to them. So they went out and they tried to contact and build out different ways to educate youth on, what the justice system actually entails and ways they can navigate it if they are in the justice system. So different things that it depends. There's really no good answer for that. It's about what they value, what they research, and it kind of takes it from there. And I think the research component of that is really important too. One of the years we did it, we had a group of students who were really focusing on local police relations with the community. And initially they were looking at the issues with police brutality, but then as they started to do their research, they realized that they wanted to flip their project. So instead of it being about Cambridge in a negative light with the police department, they actually used Cambridge as a spotlight for other communities for engagement with youth. So I really think that the whole process is important, and that's why I think we kind of base it in the foundation of research and making sure that our projects and the issues that we are researching can apply to different things. So that's how I would answer that.
Well, those projects relate to the next question, which I think is a great one. One of the areas that we've seen the least civic knowledge is in relation to local government. And most of the existing content focuses on policy and or the federal government. And in reality, local government often has the greatest impact on everyday life. How would the two of you suggest addressing this gap in civic education?
Well, to jump in here for a moment, so we do prioritize local institutions in the curriculum that Tom and I have been talking about here. So students learn about all levels, federal, state, and local. And we do think that that is critically important. I think that there is a movement in this direction broadly across the civic education field. I don't think we're unique. So there has historically been a gap, but I think a lot of us are trying to fill it. I will add that focusing on the local level is helpful also for two reasons beyond knowledge. For starters, one of the things we're trying to do is really show students that they can have a sense and experience of agency. And it's harder to get there, right? If you're thinking about the federal government, it's so far away, it's opaque, it's massive, and the like. And precisely because eventually they will be voters and they will be thinking about the federal government, they need that strong anchor in a real experience of agency, which is best achieved at the local level. So that's an important part. The second thing that's important is that when you're really looking around your community and trying to figure out what's working, what's not working, you just have a chance to think about community well-being, what do I care about, and so forth, in a way that's sort of separate from the now highly polarized frames of national politics. And so again, it gives students a chance to really explore their values, as Tom was saying, to figure out who agrees with them, who doesn't agree with them. And it doesn't fall into any kind of neat or predictable pattern. So it's a very rich opportunity for learning, and again, an opportunity for practicing that relationship building across lines of difference. So the local piece is just super, super important.
Yeah, and I'll speak to the local piece because it's really one of the linchpins, especially of our student-led civics projects. I think I'll steal something I heard Danielle say. We want students to kind of build tactical knowledge of their local government. So for me, part of their project is they have to connect it in at least one different way to a local aspect of government. So literally they create a local government guide as part of their project in which they identify people with high civic capital in our local community and how they will do that. And just another example, I'll give a shout out to my city because we do something called participatory budgeting. And in Cambridge, if you are in sixth grade or older, you can vote on these different ways that Cambridge can spend their money. And my eighth graders participated in that, and they had to link their values to what they were voting for. So it just kind of gives them this mindset of being civically engaged and how being a part of your local community and local government is vital.
Oh, it does sound like the local has a appropriately central place in this curriculum. Another question here is about the differences between teaching civics and teaching U.S. government. What do you see as the relationship between those and the differences?
So I will say for me, these are words that cover, roughly speaking, the same territory, actually. I do know people use the vocabulary in different ways. We talk broadly about civic learning. And I mentioned at the start that in our work, it's been really important to bring together into one approach a focus on core disciplinary knowledge. And maybe that's what people often mean when they think about US government, with also a focus on scaffolding, student agency, and responsibility. Those things can be fully integrated. That's what we do in our civic learning work. And so there is a heck of a lot of core content around US government in our curriculum. And then there is also a heck of a lot of content around understanding, as you heard, your local government, local issues, and precisely how you as an individual can engage with them. But what matters for us is that those things be merged. So.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that quickly. One of my favorite lessons in the curriculum, it's in a unit called the preamble unit. And before students actually engage in much of the material, they go through a gallery walk where they look at a bunch of different images and artifacts, and they come up with their own definition of what they think civics is based off of those artifacts. And you'll notice the different words like history, government, all of these things are combined because you really can't teach civics without covering all those topics.
Here's another important question for the two of you. How does civic education connect to respect for inclusion and diversity?
Do you want to go first this time, Tom?
I always defer to you, Danielle.
I know, so you shouldn't though, so go for it.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, we try to get as many different perspectives, as many different stories as we can into the curriculum. So I just think civics in nature, we want to make sure we're centering all stories and all people's voices are being heard, especially in my class. I have such a diverse class of people and learners from different backgrounds in many different ways. So I try to make sure that we vary the different stories that we're learning. We learn about the founding fathers. We're also learning about Fred Korematsu. We're learning about Dolores Huerta. So I just think that we're just trying to make sure that we're including all people, and because our stories is together. We're a pluralist society where we're all trying to create that more perfect union that I was speaking of earlier.
Exactly. I will really agree with that. The Educating for American Democracy roadmap puts a big emphasis on pluralism, which is about all the various ways in which we do have differences of experience and background and perspective. It could be race, it could be gender, ethnicity, religion, geographic origin, viewpoint, family background and experience. So really the whole gamut. And we want people to bring their whole selves to the civic conversation. So it's important, really, that we scaffold the ability for people to take their own personal identity and then connect it to those shared aspects of democratic identity, which are about civil disagreement, civic friendship, realizing that we have our institutions to solve problems together and the like. And that can be hard and tough, and there's lots to negotiate and so forth. But that's the job, is we're trying to sort of build bridges between our personal identities and a concept of our shared democratic identity. And that's where you get a civic identity, is when you can fuse those two things.
Great. So we heard about this wonderful curriculum that you're teaching, Tom, but what can parents do in their own towns to support their school district civic engagement activity if those towns don't already have a robust civics program?
Yeah, I would just try to find ways with their eighth graders or young people, just to talk at the dinner table about what's going on in the community. As we mentioned earlier, the more local you can keep it, the more tangible it is, the more real it is, which is why we really try to center local government in it. So just in their community, ways that they can, be a part of something, volunteer for something, find civic organizations maybe outside of the school that they have a passion for, find an issue that they care about. The things that we do in the classroom don't end in the classroom. I think once you identify what you value, what you care about, an issue you have a passion for, I know for me, I think about it and I read about it and I try to engage with it all the time. So I just think about it's like really value-based and issue-based, and that's where you start.
And perhaps engaging with the school board could be one of the activities.
Absolutely. If the issue is like getting better civic education in the class, contact your school board, city councilor, or town selectman.
Yeah. So how are you addressing threats to democracy and student and teachers' concerns about this? And how do you maintain a kind of safe environment while discussing this?
So those are great questions as well. And so I think there are a few different pieces of this. I mean, so for starters, Tom sort of alluded to this already, but there is a lot of work done in the civic engagement in our democracy curriculum around values, one's own values, but also listening to and understanding other people's values. So right at the very beginning of the curriculum, students are learning how to hear each other and how to make space for differences of perspective. And you have to really set up those norms from the get-go before you get to hard subjects. So that then when you get to hard subjects, you are ready to engage. We have a colleague in the Ed School, Mira Levinson, who runs a program called Ed Ethics, which has also got terrific offerings for educators who are trying to understand how to support hard conversations or difficult conversations better. And it's important that we make a distinction between open and closed conversations, right? So at this point, the causes of the Civil War, the fact that that included slavery, that's a closed question, actually. There is consensus around that and so forth. And so an educator can teach that that's one of the causes. We have issues in contemporary debates that are open questions. For example, perhaps how we think about what's the right answer with regard to abortion and reproductive rights and things like that. So there, for open questions, it's important that a teacher go ahead and make space for the students and not actually put their own viewpoint into the classroom. And so learning how to negotiate that difference between closed questions and open questions and distinguish between them, that's a really important part of being able to do that work.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, and I also think that like it's something that we all share, we all belong to, here, and I think that this is partly from Dr. Allen, but I really ground a lot of what we do in the second sentence of the Declaration of Independence. We're all humans, we all have these rights, and the government's job is to protect those rights. And if they can't, it's our job to help them do that or change it, right? So I think people can kind of find power in that. It's a grounding place to start, where we're all kind of starting with this idea of rights, and then when we find shared values, we can build from there. So I really think that's the core of it.
This is our last question that we have time for, and a very important one. How can civic education help overcome polarization in society?
And I apologize for sounding like a bit of a broken record here, but I will say, I mean, I described the Educating for American Democracy roadmap as a project that was designed to overcome polarization. And what we did in that is exactly what we do in the curriculum. We started by surfacing values. And so we got really clear on where we had some shared values and we anchored on those so that when we hit points of conflict, we could come back to those shared values actually. And so that worked. I mean, we got through all kinds of hard things we had to negotiate in designing that roadmap. And that is really what the curriculum is also trying to help young people learn how to do. So that's why you've heard so much of this from Tom and me about the importance of those values, anchoring around them, anchoring around our expectations for a government that's going to protect our rights, and the notion that we can work together to help secure that. So.
Yeah, and I would just add on the three kind of big ones that we talk about are civic self-care, civic self-confidence, and civic reciprocity. And like in those three shared civic values are all what Dr. Allen just said. So it's really about hearing different voices, as long as those voices are democratic in nature and not hateful, right? How do we make sure we're hearing other perspectives? Just because we think something doesn't necessarily mean we're right and they're wrong. How do you hear other perspectives? And in doing so, you actually strengthen your own perspective, which is really what we're trying to do with this curriculum.
Great, wonderful. Well, thanks to the audience for their wonderful questions and for joining us today. And a special big thanks to our guests, Danielle Allen and Tom Trainor.